Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Science Society. Tonight, we're drifting into the gentle embrace of nature itself. Not the nature of postcards or screensavers, but the real, breathing, interconnected world that surrounds us and sustains every moment of our existence. As you settle into your space, allow your breathing to soften, your shoulders to drop, and your mind to open to the quiet wonders we'll explore together. If you find peace in these journeys through science and wonder, I invite you to like this video or subscribe to the channel. It helps others discover this restful corner of curiosity, one sleepy explorer at a time. But for now, there's nothing you need to do except rest, listen, and let the story of nature unfold around you like a warm blanket on a cool evening. Tonight's journey takes us through the living systems that make Earth not just a planet, but a home. We'll follow invisible pathways where elements dance between Earth and sky, trace the hidden connections that bind forest to ocean, and discover how every breath you take connects you to processes that have been unfolding for billions of years. Nature is not a collection of separate things. It is a continuous conversation, a flowing exchange where nothing exists in isolation. As we move through this exploration, you'll begin to see how water remembers its journey through clouds and roots, how carbon builds bodies and atmospheres, and how nitrogen whispers between lightning and leaves. Let your eyes grow heavy. Let your thoughts drift like seeds on the wind. We're about to explore the most intricate, elegant system ever to emerge in this corner of the universe. The living web. Interconnected ecosystems. Imagine for a moment that you could see the invisible threads connecting every living thing. If you possessed such vision, you would witness a world transformed. The forest would reveal itself as a single breathing organism, pulsing with exchanges too subtle for normal sight. The ocean would shimmer with highways of nutrients flowing between microscopic algae and the largest whales. Even the air would glow with the constant traffic of oxygen, carbon dioxide, and countless other molecules moving between plant and animal, earth and sky. This is the reality of ecosystems, those intricate networks where living organisms interact with their physical environment in an endless dance of give and take. The word ecosystem itself holds this truth in its very structure. Eco comes from the Greek word for home, oikos, while system speaks to interconnection, to parts working together as a whole. An ecosystem is not simply a place where organisms happen to live. It is the relationship itself, the web of connections that transforms a collection of individuals into a living community. Consider the forest floor beneath a canopy of ancient trees. At first glance, it might seem like a quiet place, perhaps even a dormant one during the deep months of winter, but if you shrink down and move through this landscape at the scale of a fungus or a bacterium, you would find yourself in one of the busiest, most interconnected cities on Earth. Beneath your feet, in every handful of healthy forest soil, there are more microorganisms than there are humans on the entire planet. These tiny beings form the foundation of an underground economy more complex than any human civilization. The roots of trees do not explore the soil alone. They form partnerships with fungi in relationships so ancient and so crucial that most plants cannot truly thrive without them. These associations are called mycorrhizae, a term that simply means fungus root. The arrangement works with elegant simplicity. The fungus, with its thread-like filaments called hyphae, extends far beyond where roots can reach, exploring tiny crevices in the soil, dissolving minerals from rock particles, and absorbing nutrients from decomposing matter. These fungal networks can extend for miles, creating a vast underground internet that connects trees not just to fungi, but to each other. What the fungus gathers, it shares with the tree, delivering nitrogen, phosphorus, and other essential nutrients directly to the root cells. In return, the tree provides something the fungus cannot make for itself: sugar, manufactured in the leaves through photosynthesis, and transported down through the trunk to these underground partners. This is not exploitation. This is not theft. This is mutualism, a relationship where both partners benefit, where each provides what the other needs. The tree gets nutrients from the soil, the fungus gets energy from the sun, and neither could thrive as well alone as they do together. But the story goes deeper still. Research has revealed that these fungal networks do more than just trade nutrients. They carry information. When a tree is attacked by insects, it can send chemical signals through the fungal network, warning other trees of the danger. Those receiving trees can then activate their own defenses, producing compounds that make their leaves less palatable or that attract predators of the insects. The forest, it turns out, can communicate. It can warn. It can, in its own way, remember and prepare. This underground network supports another crucial community: the decomposers. Bacteria, fungi, insects, and other organisms make their living by breaking down dead material, transforming fallen leaves, dead wood, and animal remains back into their component parts. Without decomposers, nutrients would remain locked in dead tissue, unavailable to living plants. The dead would accumulate in ever-growing piles, and life as we know it would grind to a halt. But with decomposers, death becomes the beginning of new life. The nitrogen that once formed the proteins of a fallen bird might, within months, become part of a growing mushroom, then travel through the fungal network to a tree root, rise up through the trunk, and emerge in a new leaf, where it helps capture sunlight and carbon dioxide to build new living tissue. Above ground, the visible ecosystem pulses with equally intricate relationships. Consider the simple act of a bee visiting a flower. The bee is not simply stealing nectar, it is providing a service without which many plants could not reproduce. As the bee moves from flower to flower, seeking the sweet reward of nectar, grains of pollen cling to the tiny hairs covering its body. When it visits the next flower, some of this pollen brushes off onto the flower's stigma, the female reproductive structure, allowing fertilization to occur. The flower provides food. The bee provides reproduction. Both benefit. Both depend on the other. Some of these relationships have become so specific, so finely tuned, that the partners can survive only together. The yucca plant and the yucca moth have evolved in such tight partnership that each species exists only because the other does. The moth pollinates only yucca flowers, and yucca flowers can be pollinated only by this particular moth. The female moth gathers pollen from one flower. then flies to another, where she deliberately places the pollen on the stigma before laying her eggs in the flower's ovary. When the eggs hatch, the larvae eat some of the developing seeds, but not all of them. The plant sacrifices some seeds to feed the moth larvae, but in return receives the pollination service it needs to produce any seeds at all. If either species were to vanish, the other would follow within a single generation. These partnerships extend throughout every ecosystem on Earth. In the ocean, clownfish make their homes among the stinging tentacles of sea anemones. The fish gains protection from predators that cannot withstand the anemone's sting, while the anemone receives nutrients from the fish's waste and benefits from the fish's movements, which improve water circulation around its body. In African savannas, oxpecker birds ride on the backs of large mammals, eating ticks and other parasites from their skin. The birds get easy meals. The mammals get grooming services that improve their health and comfort. Not all relationships in nature are so harmonious, of course. Predation, competition, and parasitism also shape ecosystems in fundamental ways. But even these seemingly negative interactions play crucial roles in maintaining ecosystem health. Predators prevent herbivore populations from growing so large that they destroy their food supply. Competition pushes species to specialize, to find unique niches where they can avoid direct conflict with others. Even parasites, by regulating host populations and transferring nutrients between species, contribute to the overall functioning of the system. The concept of biodiversity captures this incredible variety of life and relationship. Biodiversity refers not just to the number of different species in a place, but to the genetic diversity within those species and the diversity of ecosystems themselves. High biodiversity brings remarkable benefits to ecosystems. When many species are present, the system becomes more resilient, better able to withstand disturbances. If one species declines, others can step in to fill similar roles. A diverse system can also provide more ecological services, those benefits that nature provides to humans and other organisms. These services include things like water purification, soil formation, pollination of crops, climate regulation, and nutrient cycling. Research has shown that ecosystems with higher biodiversity tend to be more productive, meaning they generate more biomass, more living material. They're also more stable over time, experiencing fewer dramatic swings in population or function. This makes intuitive sense when you think about it. In a diverse system, there are more connections, more relationships, more ways for nutrients and energy to flow. If one pathway is blocked, others remain open. The system has backup plans, redundancies that keep it functioning even when conditions change. But this web of life faces unprecedented challenges. Human activities have begun to fray the threads, to break connections that took millions of years to form. When we clear a forest, we're not just removing trees, we're destroying fungal networks, eliminating habitat for countless species, disrupting nutrient cycles, and severing relationships between organisms that depend on each other. When we pollute a river, we're not just contaminating water. We're poisoning the base of food webs, killing the organisms that filter and purify water, and sending ripples of damage downstream to the ocean. When we change the climate by releasing greenhouse gases, we're altering the basic conditions under which these relationships formed, potentially forcing species apart even when habitat remains. The good news, if we can call it that, is that understanding these connections gives us the power to protect them. By preserving biodiversity, by maintaining intact ecosystems, by allowing natural processes to continue, we protect not just individual species, but the relationships between them. The flows of energy and nutrients that sustain all life, including our own. As you drift towards sleep, picture these invisible connections, these threads of relationship that bind the living world into one vast, breathing whole. Feel yourself as part of this web, connected through your breath to the plants that made your oxygen, connected through your food to the soil and sun that grew it, connected through your very atoms to the cycles that have shaped Earth for 4.5 billion years. The breath of Earth, atmospheric cycles. Let us turn our attention now to something so fundamental that we rarely think about it. Something happening at this very moment as you settle deeper into rest. You are breathing, your lungs expand, pulling air into your body. Oxygen molecules cross from your lungs into your bloodstream, where they bind to hemoglobin in your red blood cells and travel throughout your body, delivering the element that allows your cells to burn fuel and create energy. Then, having helped your cells function, that oxygen, now combined with carbon to form carbon dioxide, travels back to your lungs and leaves your body with your next exhale. This simple act connects you to some of the most important processes on Earth, to cycles that stretch back billions of years and extend across the entire planet. The air you breathe is mostly nitrogen, about 78%. Nearly 21% is oxygen. The remaining 1% includes argon, carbon dioxide, and traces of many other gases. This particular mixture is not a cosmic accident. It is a product of life itself. Earth's original atmosphere billions of years ago contained almost no oxygen. Oxygen is a reactive element. It combines readily with other substances. Any oxygen present in the early atmosphere would have quickly reacted with iron in rocks, with methane and other gases, and disappeared from the air. The oxygen now filling your lungs exists because of photosynthesis. This process, carried out by plants, algae, and certain bacteria, captures energy from sunlight and uses it to build sugar molecules from carbon dioxide and water. As a byproduct, photosynthesis releases oxygen. When photosynthetic organisms first evolved, probably more than 3 billion years ago, the oxygen they produced at first just reacted with dissolved iron in the oceans, forming rust-colored iron oxide that settled to the seafloor. These ancient formations, called banded iron formations, can still be seen in rocks around the world. They represent a chemical record of Earth's transition, showing when photosynthesis began to change the planet. Eventually, after perhaps 1 billion years or more, all the available iron in the oceans had been oxidized. Oxygen began to accumulate in the atmosphere. This was, in many ways, Earth's first pollution crisis. To many of the organisms alive at the time, oxygen was a toxic poison. It damaged their cellular machinery and threatened their existence. Some organisms died out. Others retreated to oxygen-free environments where they remain to this day in deep ocean sediments, in waterlogged soils, in the guts of animals. But other organisms evolved to tolerate oxygen, then to use it. Aerobic respiration, the process your cells are using right now to generate energy, evolved as a way to harness oxygen's reactivity for life's purposes. Organisms that could use oxygen could generate far more energy from their food than those that could not. They could grow larger, move faster, live more complex lives. So, the oxygen in the air around you right now, the oxygen entering your body with each breath, came from photosynthesis. Most of it was produced by tiny organisms in the ocean called phytoplankton, microscopic algae that drift near the surface where sunlight penetrates. These organisms are so small that you need a microscope to see individuals, yet they are so numerous that they produce about half of Earth's oxygen. The other half comes from plants on land, from forests and grasslands, from algae in lakes and rivers. Every breath you take is a gift from the photosynthetic world. The oxygen cycle connects intimately with the carbon cycle, which we'll explore more deeply soon. For now, notice the reciprocity. During photosynthesis, organisms take in carbon dioxide and release oxygen. During respiration, organisms take in oxygen and release carbon dioxide. Plants do both. During the day, they photosynthesize, taking in more carbon dioxide than they release and producing a net output of oxygen. At night, when photosynthesis stops but respiration continues, they take in oxygen and release carbon dioxide. Animals, fungi, and most bacteria do only respiration, taking in oxygen and releasing carbon dioxide. The balance of these processes maintains atmospheric oxygen at relatively stable levels. Interestingly, most of the Earth's oxygen is not in the atmosphere at all. The vast majority is locked in rocks, in the minerals that make up the planet's crust and mantle. Some oxygen also exists in water, both in the oceans and in the water molecules that are part of all living things. The oxygen cycle includes all these reservoirs, with oxygen constantly moving between them on timescales ranging from seconds to millions of years. When you breathe in, some of the oxygen molecules entering your lungs might have been released from a leaf just hours ago. Others might have been freed from rock by weathering processes over geological time. Still others might have cycled between photosynthesis and respiration countless times since their original release billions of years ago. There is also a small but important source of atmospheric oxygen that doesn't come from photosynthesis. High in the atmosphere, ultraviolet radiation from the sun can split water molecules and certain nitrogen compounds into their component atoms, a process called photolysis. Some of the oxygen produced this way escapes the atmosphere entirely, lost to space. The rest remains, contributing modestly to Earth's oxygen supply. Meanwhile, the atmosphere loses oxygen continuously. Every organism that breathes removes oxygen from the air, temporarily or permanently incorporating it into their tissues or using it to break down organic molecules for energy. Fire consumes oxygen rapidly, combining it with carbon in wood, or other fuel. Weathering of rocks, particularly rocks containing iron, also removes oxygen from the atmosphere as it oxidizes minerals at Earth's surface. Over geological time, the burial of organic matter in sediments removes both oxygen and carbon from circulation. When this buried organic matter is eventually heated and compressed, it becomes fossil fuels: coal, oil, and natural gas, each representing ancient photosynthesis, ancient sunlight and carbon dioxide transformed into stored energy. The delicate balance between oxygen production and consumption has kept atmospheric oxygen relatively stable for hundreds of millions of years, hovering around 21% of the atmosphere. This level is high enough to support the energetic lifestyles of complex animals, including humans, but not so high that fires would burn out of control. Much higher oxygen levels, and even wet vegetation would burst into flame with the smallest spark. Much lower, and large animals would struggle to get enough oxygen to power their bodies. As you breathe in, drawing oxygen into your lungs, and breathe out, releasing carbon dioxide into the air, you participate in these ancient cycles. The oxygen you inhale was probably released from a plant or phytoplankton within the last few years. It may have traveled around the world on atmospheric currents before reaching you. The carbon dioxide you exhale will likely be absorbed by a photosynthetic organism within months, possibly days, where it will become part of a new sugar molecule, perhaps part of a leaf or a fruit, perhaps food for another organism. Your breath connects you to forests and oceans, to the microscopic phytoplankton drifting in sunlit surface waters, to the grass in a distant meadow. Every breath is an exchange with the living world, a reminder that you are not separate from nature but woven into its most fundamental processes. The carbon journey. Carbon is the element of life. Every organism on Earth, from the simplest bacterium to the largest whale, from single-celled algae to towering redwood trees, builds its body primarily from carbon. Carbon's unique chemical properties allow it to form stable bonds with many other elements and to create long chains and complex structures. This versatility makes carbon the backbone of all organic molecules, the building blocks of life itself. The story of how carbon moves through Earth's systems, constantly recycled and reused, is one of the most important narratives in all of science. The carbon cycle is the pathway that carbon takes as it moves between the atmosphere, living organisms, the oceans, and the Earth's crust. Like the oxygen cycle, it operates on multiple timescales, from the rapid exchanges of photosynthesis and respiration to the slow geological processes that lock carbon in rocks for millions of years. Understanding the carbon cycle is crucial for understanding life on Earth, climate systems, and the changes currently reshaping our planet. Let's begin in the atmosphere. Carbon exists in the air primarily as carbon dioxide, a molecule consisting of one carbon atom bonded to two oxygen atoms. Although carbon dioxide makes up only a tiny fraction of the atmosphere, currently just over 400 parts per million, or about 0.04%. It plays a role far larger than these small numbers might suggest. Carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, meaning it traps heat in the atmosphere. This greenhouse effect is essential for life. Without it, Earth would be too cold for liquid water and the life it supports. But as we'll see, changes in atmospheric carbon dioxide levels can dramatically alter Earth's climate. Carbon dioxide enters the biological part of the carbon cycle through photosynthesis. This process, carried out by plants, algae, and photosynthetic bacteria, captures carbon from the air and incorporates it into organic molecules, primarily sugars. Picture a leaf, green and vibrant in the summer sun. Inside its cells are small structures called chloroplasts, each one packed with chlorophyll, the pigment that gives plants their green color and captures light energy. When sunlight strikes the chlorophyll, it energizes electrons, starting a chain of reactions that ultimately splits water molecules and releases oxygen. The energy captured from sunlight is then used to power a series of chemical reactions that combine carbon dioxide and water into glucose, a simple sugar. This process seems almost magical when you think about it. Plants take two invisible gases, carbon dioxide and water vapor, add sunlight, and produce solid matter, the substance of their bodies. When a tree grows, adding tons of wood to its trunk and branches, that mass comes primarily from carbon dioxide pulled from the air. The tree is in a very real sense made of air and light. The carbon atoms that were floating free in the atmosphere become part of the tree's structure, locked into the complex molecules of cellulose that give wood its strength. Once carbon has been captured by photosynthesis and incorporated into a plant's body, it can take many paths. Some of the sugar produced by photosynthesis is used by the plant itself for energy, broken down through respiration in a process that essentially reverses photosynthesis, releasing carbon dioxide back into the air. Other sugar is used to build more complex molecules. Cellulose for cell walls, starches for energy storage, proteins, DNA, and countless other organic compounds. This carbon becomes the physical substance of the plant's leaves, roots, stems, and reproductive structures. The carbon in plants then moves through food webs. An herbivore eats the plant, incorporating some of that carbon into its own body. The herbivore uses some of the carbon for energy, breaking it down through respiration and releasing carbon dioxide with every breath. A carnivore eats the herbivore, acquiring carbon that originated in plants, perhaps several steps removed now but traceable back to photosynthesis. At each step in the food chain, organisms use some carbon for energy, releasing it as carbon dioxide, and incorporate some into their own tissues and waste products. When organisms die, they don't simply disappear. Their bodies become food for decomposers, the bacteria, fungi, and small animals that break down dead organic matter. As decomposers feed, they too respire, releasing the carbon from dead tissues back into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. In most ecosystems, this decomposition happens relatively quickly. A fallen leaf might be broken down completely in a single year. The body of a large animal might take several years, but eventually almost all the carbon returns to the atmosphere, ready to be captured again by photosynthesis. Almost all, but not quite all. In some environments, particularly waterlogged soils where oxygen is scarce, decomposition proceeds very slowly. Dead plant material can accumulate faster than it breaks down. Over long periods, this material can become buried under more sediment, subjected to heat and pressure, and transformed into fossil fuels, coal, oil, and natural gas. This process removes carbon from the active cycle, locking it underground for millions of years. The coal we burn today comes from plants that lived hundreds of millions of years ago, in vast swampy forests that covered much of the planet during the Carboniferous period. The oil and natural gas come from the remains of ancient marine organisms, plankton, and algae that lived in shallow seas, died, and were buried in sediments that eventually transformed them into fuel. The ocean plays a crucial role in the carbon cycle, acting as the largest active reservoir of carbon near Earth's surface. Carbon dioxide dissolves readily in seawater, where some of it reacts with water to form carbonic acid, the same weak acid that gives carbonated beverages their slight tang. This dissolved carbon dioxide can be used by marine phytoplankton for photosynthesis. These microscopic organisms, drifting in the sunlit upper layers of the ocean, perform the same basic process as land plants, capturing carbon from the dissolved carbon dioxide in seawater and building it into organic molecules. When marine organisms die, their bodies sink. Some of this material is consumed by other organisms or decomposed by bacteria in the water column, releasing carbon dioxide back into the ocean. But some sinks all the way to the deep ocean floor, where it can be buried in sediment. The shells of many marine organisms are made of calcium carbonate, a compound containing carbon. When these organisms die and their shells accumulate on the seafloor, they form limestone and other carbonate rocks, effectively removing carbon from the cycle for geological time periods. Eventually, the movement of tectonic plates may push these rocks deep into Earth's interior, where heat and pressure can release the carbon as carbon dioxide, which may escape back to the atmosphere through volcanic eruptions. This geological carbon cycle operates on timescales of millions of years. For most of Earth's history, the carbon cycle maintained a rough balance. Carbon flowed from the atmosphere into organisms and oceans, then slowly made its way into rocks and sediments, while volcanic activity released carbon back to the atmosphere. The balance wasn't perfect. The amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has varied significantly over geological time, but changes happened slowly enough that life could adapt. In the past few centuries, human activities have dramatically altered the carbon cycle. When we burn fossil fuels, coal, oil, and natural gas, we're releasing carbon that was removed from the atmosphere hundreds of millions of years ago. We're taking carbon that was locked safely underground and putting it back into the air and oceans at a rate far faster than natural processes can remove it. Deforestation compounds the problem. When forests are cleared, not only do we lose the trees that were actively removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, but the carbon stored in their wood often gets released as carbon dioxide when the trees are burned or as they decompose. The result is a rapid rise in atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations, from about 280 parts per million before the Industrial Revolution to over 400 parts per million today. This increase is driving climate change, warming the planet and altering weather patterns, ocean chemistry, and ecosystems worldwide. Yet even in this challenging time, the carbon cycle reminds us of nature's resilience and interconnectedness. Every forest that grows removes carbon from the air. Every ocean that absorbs carbon dioxide moderates the increase in the atmosphere, though at a cost to marine life as the ocean becomes more acidic. Understanding the carbon cycle gives us both the knowledge of how we've disrupted it and the insight into how we might begin to restore balance. As you drift deeper into sleep, imagine carbon atoms flowing through their cycles, from air to leaf to soil to air again. An endless dance of transformation that has sustained life for billions of years, and that continues even now with every breath you take. The nitrogen story. While carbon forms the framework of life, nitrogen provides much of its function. Nitrogen is a crucial component of amino acids, the building blocks of proteins, and of nucleic acids, the molecules that carry genetic information. Without nitrogen, there could be no DNA, no proteins, no life as we know it. Yet for all its importance, nitrogen presents organisms with a peculiar problem. The atmosphere is nearly 78% nitrogen gas, a molecule consisting of two nitrogen atoms bonded tightly together. The problem is that this triple bond between nitrogen atoms is incredibly strong. Most organisms cannot break this bond to access the nitrogen they need. They cannot simply breathe nitrogen in and use it, even though it surrounds them in abundance. The story of how nitrogen moves from the vast atmospheric reservoir into living things and back again is one of transformation, of cooperative relationships, and of elegant biological solutions to chemical challenges. The nitrogen cycle begins with nitrogen fixation, the process of breaking apart nitrogen gas molecules and incorporating the nitrogen into compounds that organisms can use. This process requires substantial energy to overcome that strong triple bond. In nature, nitrogen fixation happens in three main ways. The first is through lightning. The intense energy of a lightning bolt, which can heat the air to temperatures higher than the surface of the sun, provides enough energy to break nitrogen molecules apart. The freed nitrogen atoms can then combine with oxygen to form nitrogen oxides, which dissolve in rain and fall to Earth as nitrates. This process contributes a small but significant amount of usable nitrogen to ecosystems. The second natural source of fixed nitrogen is biological nitrogen fixation, carried out by certain bacteria. These remarkable microorganisms possess an enzyme called nitrogenase that can break the strong nitrogen-nitrogen bond. The process requires a lot of energy, about 16 molecules of ATP, the cell's energy currency, for every molecule of nitrogen gas converted. But the bacteria that have evolved this ability gain access to an unlimited supply of nitrogen, giving them an advantage in nitrogen-poor environments. Some nitrogen-fixing bacteria live freely in soil or water. Others form symbiotic relationships with plants, living inside root nodules, specialized structures that house and protect the bacteria. The most well-known of these partnerships involves legumes, plants in the pea and bean family. If you've ever pulled up a clover plant or a pea plant, you may have noticed small bumps or nodules on the roots. Inside these nodules live billions of bacteria, primarily species of the genus Rhizobium. The plant provides the bacteria with sugars from photosynthesis, giving them the energy they need for nitrogen fixation. The bacteria convert nitrogen gas from the soil air into ammonia, a form of nitrogen the plant can use to build proteins and nucleic acids. This partnership is so effective that legumes often thrive in nitrogen-poor soils where other plants struggle. The third way nitrogen is fixed today is through industrial processes. The Haber-Bosch process, developed in the early 20th century, uses high temperature and pressure to force nitrogen gas to react with hydrogen, creating ammonia. This synthetic ammonia is the basis of most nitrogen fertilizers used in modern agriculture. The development of this process has allowed global food production to increase dramatically, supporting a growing human population. However, it has also led to massive additions of nitrogen to ecosystems. With environmental consequences we are only beginning to fully understand. Once nitrogen has been fixed into ammonia or ammonia-containing compounds, it becomes available to living organisms. Plants take up nitrogen from soil, primarily in the form of nitrate or ammonium ions. Inside the plant, this nitrogen is incorporated into amino acids and then into proteins. The nitrogen might become part of chlorophyll, helping the plant capture light for photosynthesis. It might become part of enzymes that catalyze essential chemical reactions. It might be stored in seeds, providing nutrition for the next generation. When animals eat plants, they break down the plant proteins into amino acids, then reassemble those amino acids into their own proteins. The nitrogen that was in the atmosphere, fixed by bacteria or lightning, then taken up by a plant, might now be part of the muscle tissue of a rabbit, the feathers of a bird, or the scales of a fish. At each step in the food chain, nitrogen moves from one organism to another, always in the form of organic compounds, always essential to life. What happens to nitrogen when organisms die? Like carbon, it is recycled. Decomposer organisms, primarily bacteria and fungi, break down the proteins and nucleic acids in dead tissue. Through a process called ammonification, they convert organic nitrogen back into ammonia. Some of this ammonia can be taken up directly by plants, but much of it undergoes further transformation through nitrification, a two-step process carried out by specialized bacteria. One group of bacteria converts ammonia to nitrite. Then another group converts nitrite to nitrate. These nitrates can be absorbed by plant roots, beginning the cycle anew. The cycle would continue indefinitely, recycling nitrogen through organisms and soil, except for one more process: denitrification. Certain bacteria living in oxygen-poor environments like waterlogged soils or deep sediments can use nitrate as an alternative to oxygen for their metabolism. In doing so, they convert nitrate back into nitrogen gas, which escapes into the atmosphere. Denitrification closes the loop, returning nitrogen to the atmospheric reservoir where it started. The nitrogen cycle maintains itself through these various processes, with nitrogen constantly moving from atmosphere to soil to organisms and back. However, human activities have dramatically increased the rate at which nitrogen moves through the cycle. The production of synthetic fertilizers, the burning of fossil fuels, which releases nitrogen oxides into the atmosphere, and the cultivation of nitrogen-fixing crops have all added vast amounts of reactive nitrogen to the environment. Much of this nitrogen ends up in places where it doesn't belong. In groundwater, where it can make drinking water unsafe. In rivers and lakes, where it causes algae to grow out of control. In coastal oceans, where it contributes to dead zones, areas where oxygen levels drop so low that most marine life cannot survive. And in the atmosphere, where nitrogen oxides contribute to smog and climate change. Despite these disruptions, the fundamental processes of the nitrogen cycle continue. In soils around the world, bacteria continue to fix nitrogen and return it to the atmosphere. Plants continue to take up nitrates and build them into their tissues. Animals continue to consume plants and each other, passing nitrogen through food webs. Decomposers continue their patient work of breaking down the dead and returning nutrients to the soil. The cycle persists, demonstrating the resilience of natural systems, even as it also shows how human activities can push those systems out of balance. As you rest, as your muscles relax and your mind settles, remember that your body contains nitrogen that has cycled through this system. The nitrogen in your DNA was once in the air. Before that, perhaps it was part of a plant, or an animal, or a bacterium. It may have been fixed by lightning in a thunderstorm, or by bacteria in the root of a clover plant. It has certainly passed through countless organisms over the billions of years since life began. The nitrogen that makes you who you are has been part of the living world's great cycle of transformation, and will continue that cycle long after you are gone. A thread in the endless weaving of life. Water, the universal solvent. Water is the medium of life. It fills cells, carries nutrients, removes waste, and enables the chemical reactions that keep organisms alive. It shapes landscapes through erosion and transport, moderates Earth's temperature, and cycles between Earth, sea, and sky in a dance older than life itself. The water molecule is simple. 2 hydrogen atoms bonded to 1 oxygen atom, yet its properties are extraordinary. Water can dissolve more substances than any other liquid, giving it the name universal solvent. It exists on Earth in all 3 states: solid ice, liquid water, and gaseous water vapor. It expands when it freezes, unlike most substances, which is why ice floats and why aquatic organisms can survive beneath frozen lakes. Water has a high heat capacity, meaning it can absorb or release large amounts of heat with relatively little change in temperature, making it an excellent moderator of climate. These unique properties make water essential not just to life as we know it, but perhaps to any life that could exist. The water cycle, also called the hydrologic cycle, describes how water moves through Earth's systems. It's a cycle without a true beginning or end, but we can pick up the story anywhere. Let's start with the ocean, which holds about 97% of Earth's water. The sun's energy warms the ocean surface and water molecules evaporate, transforming from liquid to gas. Each molecule that evaporates leaves behind any salts or minerals it contained, which is why water vapor is pure, even when it comes from salty seawater. This process of evaporation is the primary way water enters the atmosphere. Water also evaporates from lakes, rivers, soil, and even from living organisms. Plants release water vapor through tiny pores in their leaves, a process called transpiration. On a hot day, a large tree can release hundreds of gallons of water into the air. Animals, including humans, release water vapor with every breath and through perspiration. All of this water, from all these sources, rises into the atmosphere. As water vapor rises, it encounters cooler temperatures. Cool air cannot hold as much water vapor as warm air, so the vapor condenses, transforming back from gas to liquid, forming tiny droplets around particles of dust or salt in the air. These droplets are so small that they remain suspended, and when billions of them cluster together, they form clouds. Clouds are visible water, liquid or ice suspended in air, driven by atmospheric currents that can carry them thousands of miles from where the water originally evaporated. Eventually, when the droplets in a cloud become large enough, or when ice crystals form and grow, precipitation occurs. Water falls back to Earth as rain, snow, sleet, or hail, depending on the temperature and atmospheric conditions. About 90% of precipitation falls back into the ocean, completing a short cycle from ocean to atmosphere to ocean. But the remaining 10% falls on land, and this is the water that sustains terrestrial life and shapes landscapes. When rain falls on land, several things can happen. Some water evaporates immediately, never even reaching the ground. Some is absorbed by plants, which use it for photosynthesis and other life processes before releasing it through transpiration. Some soaks into the soil, a process called infiltration. This soil water can be absorbed by plant roots or can percolate deeper, moving through pores in soil and rock, sometimes traveling great distances underground. Water that percolates deep enough eventually reaches the water table, the level below which all pores and cracks in rock and soil are saturated with water. This groundwater slowly flows through underground aquifers, rock layers that can store and transmit water. Groundwater might remain underground for decades or even thousands of years before eventually flowing into streams, lakes, or directly into the ocean, or being brought to the surface through wells. Not all rainwater infiltrates the soil. On slopes, on hard surfaces, or when rain falls faster than soil can absorb it, water flows across the surface as runoff. This runoff collects in streams, which flow into rivers, which eventually reach the ocean. Along the way, water shapes the land, eroding rock and soil, transporting sediments, carving valleys and canyons, depositing materials to form deltas and floodplains. The landscape we see is largely the work of water, sculpted by millions of years of flowing water and the materials it carries. Water in streams and rivers doesn't just flow to the ocean, it also provides habitat for countless organisms, from microscopic bacteria to large fish. It carries nutrients eroded from the land into aquatic ecosystems. It serves as a highway for migrating fish and other animals. Riparian zones, the areas along streams and rivers, are among the most biologically diverse and productive ecosystems on Earth, sustained by the water flowing past. In cold climates, precipitation often falls as snow, and instead of immediately flowing toward the ocean, it accumulates. Mountain snowpacks store water through the winter, then release it gradually as melt in spring and summer, providing a steady supply of water when it's most needed by plants and animals. In the far north and south, and at high elevations, snow and ice can persist year-round, forming glaciers. These massive ice rivers flow very slowly, carrying huge amounts of frozen water. The ice in glaciers might have fallen as snow thousands of years ago. As climate warms, many glaciers are melting faster than they accumulate new snow, releasing ancient water and contributing to sea level rise. The water cycle also plays a crucial role in the transport of nutrients and minerals. When rain falls on land, it doesn't fall pure. It picks up particles and dissolved substances from the atmosphere. When it flows over or through soil and rock, it dissolves minerals and carries them in solution. This is how minerals and nutrients from land make their way to the ocean. Calcium eroded from limestone, for instance, might be carried by a river to the sea, where it becomes part of the shells of marine organisms, eventually forming new limestone on the ocean floor. Over geological time, this slow process recycles minerals between land and sea. Water also moderates Earth's climate. Because water has such high heat capacity, oceans absorb enormous amounts of heat in summer and tropical regions, then release this heat in winter and cooler regions. Ocean currents act like conveyor belts, transporting warm water toward the poles and cool water toward the equator, helping to distribute heat more evenly around the planet. Without this ocean heat transport, tropical regions would be even hotter, polar regions would be even colder, and the temperature difference would create far more violent weather. Water vapor itself is also a greenhouse gas, trapping heat in the atmosphere. This creates an important feedback in Earth's climate system. If the planet warms, more water evaporates from oceans and other surfaces. This additional water vapor traps more heat, causing further warming. However, more water vapor can also mean more clouds, and clouds can reflect sunlight back to space, causing cooling. The balance of these opposing effects helps determine how much Earth's climate changes in response to other factors. For life, water is not just important, it is essential. Life almost certainly arose in water, and water remains the medium in which life's chemistry occurs. Cells are mostly water. The chemical reactions of metabolism require water. Nutrients dissolve in water to be transported through organisms' bodies. Water provides structure to cells and tissues. When a plant wilts, it's because its cells have lost water pressure. Many organisms can survive long periods without food, but few can survive more than a few days without water. As you rest, listen for the sound of water if any is nearby. Rain on a roof, a stream flowing past, or even the hum of water flowing through pipes. Even in silence, know that water surrounds you. It fills the air as vapor, too sparse to see but always present. It flows beneath the ground. It cycles endlessly between earth and sky, the same water that filled ancient seas, that quenched dinosaurs' thirst, that carved the Grand Canyon, that drifted as cloud over the first forests. The water in your body has cycled through this system, falling as rain, flowing in rivers, evaporating from oceans, condensing in clouds, falling again. You are made of water that has journeyed through the world, that connects you to every place rain has fallen, every ocean wave, every mountain stream. Hidden elements, phosphorus and sulfur. While carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen capture most of our attention, other elements cycle through nature in equally important ways, even if they receive less notice. Phosphorus and sulfur both play essential roles in living organisms and have their own complex cycles. Unlike carbon and nitrogen, which have large atmospheric reservoirs, phosphorus and sulfur cycle primarily through rocks, soil, water, and living things. Their journeys through Earth's systems operate on different timescales and follow different pathways, yet remain interconnected with the other biogeochemical cycles. Phosphorus is essential for life. It is a key component of DNA and RNA, the molecules that carry and express genetic information. It's part of ATP, adenosine triphosphate, the molecule that stores and transfers energy in cells. It forms the backbone of phospholipids, the molecules that make up cell membranes. In vertebrates, phosphorus combines with calcium to give bones and teeth their hardness. Despite its critical importance, phosphorus is often in short supply in ecosystems, limiting plant growth and ecosystem productivity. The phosphorus cycle differs from the carbon and nitrogen cycles in a crucial way. It has no significant atmospheric component. Phosphorus doesn't exist as a gas under normal Earth conditions. Instead, it cycles primarily through rocks, soil, water, and living things. The cycle begins with the weathering of rocks. Phosphorus exists in rocks primarily as phosphate compounds. As rain, wind, and temperature changes slowly break down rock surfaces, phosphate ions are released into soil and water. This weathering happens slowly, over thousands of years, making the release of phosphorus a gradual process. Once phosphate enters soil, it can be absorbed by plant roots. Plants incorporate phosphorus into their tissues, using it to build DNA, RNA, ATP, and other essential molecules. When animals eat plants, they acquire the phosphorus, using it for their own biological needs. Like carbon and nitrogen, phosphorus passes through food chains, moving from organism to organism. And, like those other elements, phosphorus is returned to the soil when organisms die and decompose. Decomposers break down organic matter, releasing phosphate back into soil where it can be taken up by plants again, creating a local cycle. However, phosphorus doesn't stay in the soil-plant-soil cycle indefinitely. Rain washes some soil phosphate into streams and rivers. This dissolved and particulate phosphorus flows downstream toward lakes and oceans. In these aquatic environments, phosphorus becomes available to aquatic plants and phytoplankton, supporting aquatic food webs just as it supports terrestrial ones. But here's where the phosphorus cycle gets interesting. When aquatic organisms die, much of their phosphorus sinks to the bottom of lakes and oceans. In the deep ocean, far from shore, this phosphorus accumulates in sediments. Over geological time, these sediments become sedimentary rock. The phosphorus is now locked away, removed from the active cycle. How does this phosphorus return? The answer lies in the slow processes of geology. Over millions of years, the movement of tectonic plates can push ocean floor sediments upward, forming new land. Volcanic activity can also bring phosphorus-containing material from deep in the earth to the surface. Once phosphorus is part of rock on land again, weathering gradually releases it, and the cycle continues. This means the phosphorus cycle has a slow geological component that can take millions of years, alongside the faster biological cycling that happens in ecosystems. Human activities have significantly accelerated parts of the phosphorus cycle. Mining of phosphate rock to produce fertilizer brings phosphorus from ancient sediments into active circulation much faster than natural weathering would. When this fertilizer is applied to agricultural fields, much of the phosphorus ends up washing into waterways. The same happens with phosphorus from sewage and detergents. This excess phosphorus in lakes and rivers causes problems. Algae and aquatic plants grow rapidly when phosphorus is abundant, a process called eutrophication. When these organisms die, their decomposition consumes oxygen in the water. Fish and other organisms that need oxygen die, creating dead zones. Many lakes and rivers, and even coastal ocean areas, suffer from excess phosphorus, demonstrating how human disruption of even relatively slow natural cycles can have rapid and severe consequences. Sulfur, like phosphorus, is essential for life, though required in smaller quantities. It's a component of two amino acids, cysteine and methionine, and therefore part of many proteins. The three-dimensional structure of proteins, which determines their function, often depends on sulfur bonds called disulfide bridges. Sulfur is also found in several vitamins and coenzymes. Like phosphorus, sulfur cycles through rocks, soil, water, and living things. But unlike phosphorus, sulfur does have some gaseous forms and therefore has both atmospheric and geological components to its cycle. The sulfur cycle begins, like phosphorus, with the weathering of rocks. Sulfur is released from rocks as sulfate ions, which dissolve in water and are available to plants. Plants take up sulfate from soil and incorporate it into proteins and other compounds. Animals acquire sulfur by eating plants or other animals. When organisms die, decomposers break down sulfur-containing compounds, releasing sulfur back to soil and water. But sulfur also enters the atmosphere. Volcanic eruptions release huge amounts of sulfur dioxide gas. Some bacteria, particularly those living in wetlands and ocean sediments, produce hydrogen sulfide, a gas with the distinctive smell of rotten eggs. This gas is toxic to most organisms, but is produced by bacteria as they decompose organic matter in oxygen-poor environments. Once in the atmosphere, these sulfur gases undergo chemical reactions, often combining with oxygen and water to form sulfuric acid, a component of acid rain. This sulfuric acid eventually falls to Earth in precipitation, returning sulfur to soil and water. Ocean organisms also play a role in the sulfur cycle. Some marine phytoplankton produce dimethyl sulfide, or DMS, a compound that is released to the atmosphere. In the air, DMS can be converted to particles that serve as seeds for cloud formation. This connection between ocean biology and cloud formation is fascinating. Microscopic organisms in the ocean actually influence cloud formation and therefore climate. Some scientists hypothesize that this represents a form of planetary self-regulation, where increased ocean temperatures lead to more DMS production, more clouds, more reflection of sunlight, and cooling, though this hypothesis remains debated. Human activities have dramatically increased sulfur in the environment. The burning of fossil fuels, especially coal and oil, releases sulfur dioxide to the atmosphere. This is a major contributor to acid rain, which has damaged forests and aquatic ecosystems in many parts of the world. Acid rain forms when sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxides in the atmosphere react with water to form sulfuric and nitric acids. When this acidic precipitation falls, it lowers the pH of soil and water, harming plants and aquatic organisms, leaching nutrients from soil, and even corroding buildings and monuments. The good news is that when humans understand these cycles, we can act to reduce harm. Many countries have implemented regulations that require power plants and other facilities to reduce sulfur dioxide emissions. These efforts have successfully reduced acid rain in many regions, demonstrating that environmental problems caused by disrupting natural cycles can be addressed when society chooses to act. Both the phosphorus and sulfur cycles remind us that life depends not just on the major elements like carbon and oxygen, but on a whole suite of nutrients cycling through Earth systems. Each element has its own pathways, its own timescales, its own connections to other cycles. Together, they create the chemical conditions that allow life to exist and flourish. As you drift deeper into sleep, imagine these invisible elements flowing through rock and water, air and soil, taken up by roots, built into bodies, released by decay, moving in their patient cycles, some fast, some slow, all essential to the continuation of life on this small blue planet. Forest ecosystems, the living cathedral. Picture, if you will, a forest. Not a tame park with groomed trails, but a true old-growth forest, the kind that has existed for centuries without significant human disturbance. You stand among giants, trees so tall that their upper branches disappear into a green canopy far above. Light filters down in dappled patterns, shifting as leaves move in the breeze. The air is cool and humid, rich with the scent of earth and growing things. Beneath your feet, the ground is soft with centuries of fallen leaves, decomposing slowly into rich soil. This forest is not just a collection of trees, it is a complete world, a complex ecosystem with its own structure, its own relationships, its own cycles. Forests cover about 30% of Earth's land surface and contain about 80% of the world's terrestrial biodiversity. They are among the most productive ecosystems on the planet, capturing enormous amounts of solar energy through photosynthesis and converting it into living tissue. They store vast amounts of carbon, helping to regulate Earth's climate. They stabilize soil, preventing erosion and maintaining water quality. They influence rainfall patterns both locally and far downwind. The relationship between forests and water is so strong that deforestation can reduce rainfall hundreds of miles away, as the moisture that would have been transpired by trees no longer enters the atmosphere. A mature forest has vertical structure, different layers each with its own character and inhabitants. The highest layer is the emergent layer, where the tallest trees poke above the general canopy, exposed to full sunlight and strong winds. These trees are often home to eagles, hawks, and other birds that hunt from above. Below them is the canopy, the main leaf layer formed by the crowns of large trees. This is where most photosynthesis happens, where most flowers bloom, where most fruits form. The canopy is rich with life. Birds, insects, mammals like squirrels and monkeys, epiphytes, plants that grow on the branches of the trees rather than in the soil. In tropical rainforests, the canopy is so dense and so rich in resources that many animals never descend to the ground, living their entire lives in the treetops. Below the canopy is the understory, a layer of smaller trees, shrubs, and saplings growing in the shade of the canopy above. Light is limited here, filtered through the leaves above, so understory plants tend to have large leaves to capture as much light as possible. Many have adapted to low-light conditions, able to photosynthesize with just a few % of the sunlight available in open areas. The understory is home to many mammals, birds that nest low, in trees, and insects that prefer shade and humidity over bright sun and dry air. The lowest layer is the forest floor, covered with leaf litter, fallen branches, and decomposing wood. Here is where the work of decomposition happens, where fungi and bacteria, beetles and millipedes break down organic matter and return nutrients to the soil. The forest floor might seem quiet compared to the lively canopy, but it's actually teeming with life, most of it microscopic. A single handful of forest soil can contain more organisms than there are people on Earth, as mentioned earlier, an invisible community working constantly to recycle nutrients. Beneath even the forest floor is the soil itself, and beneath that, the mycorrhizal network we discussed earlier, that underground internet of fungal filaments connecting tree to tree. Research has shown that trees use this network not just for nutrient exchange, but for communication, and even for caring for their young. A mother tree, an old tree with a large root system, can recognize her offspring through the mycorrhizal network, and preferentially send them nutrients, giving them a better chance of survival in the competitive forest environment. When a tree is dying, it can send its stored nutrients through the network to neighboring trees, a final gift that supports the forest community even in death. Forests also demonstrate the concept of succession, the process by which ecosystems change over time. When a disturbance clears an area, a fire, a windstorm, logging, or disease killing many trees, the process of recovery begins immediately. The first plants to colonize the disturbed area are usually fast-growing species that can tolerate full sun and poor soil conditions. These pioneer species grow quickly, reproduce prolifically, and begin to modify the environment, providing shade, adding organic matter to the soil and creating conditions that allow other species to establish. Over time, these pioneers are gradually replaced by slower-growing, longer-lived species that can tolerate shadier conditions. Eventually, if disturbance doesn't occur again, the forest reaches a mature state, called a climax community, dominated by shade-tolerant species that can reproduce in their own shade, creating a relatively stable system. But no forest is truly stable. Small disturbances happen constantly. A large tree falls, creating a gap in the canopy. Light floods to the forest floor. Seedlings and saplings race to fill the gap. Some will succeed, growing into the canopy to replace the fallen tree. Others will be shaded out and die. Larger disturbances, fires, windstorms, outbreaks of insects or disease, reset succession over larger areas, creating a mosaic of forest patches at different stages of development. This mosaic increases overall forest diversity, as each successional stage supports different species. Forests provide ecosystem services far beyond timber. They protect watersheds, their roots holding soil in place and preventing erosion. Their canopy breaking the impact of rain so it soaks gently into the ground, rather than running off and causing floods. They filter water, pollutants and sediments settling out as water percolates through forest soil. They provide habitat for countless species, some of which exist nowhere else. They offer humans recreation, inspiration, solace, and connection with the natural world. Indigenous peoples have lived in and with forests for thousands of years, developing deep knowledge of forest ecology and sustainable practices for using forest resources. Yet forests worldwide face threats. Deforestation for agriculture, logging, and development continues to reduce forest area. Climate change is shifting temperature and rainfall patterns, causing some forests to die and perhaps allowing forests to expand into new areas, but causing disruption and loss in the transition. Invasive species, pests, and diseases spread by global trade threaten forests that have no evolutionary experience with these threats. Air pollution can damage trees and alter soil chemistry. Fires, intensified by a combination of past fire suppression and current climate change, are burning larger and hotter than historical patterns. Despite these challenges, forests show remarkable resilience when given the chance. Abandoned agricultural land can return to forest in a few decades. Protected forests often recover from past logging or other disturbances. Trees planted today will, in time, grow into forests that provide habitat, store carbon, and support ecological processes. The key is allowing forests time and space to function, to carry out their ancient processes of growth and succession, nutrient cycling, and carbon storage. As you settle deeper into rest, imagine yourself in a forest. Feel the soft earth beneath you. Hear the whisper of leaves overhead. Smell the rich scent of growing things and decay, the perfume of life and death intermingled. You are surrounded by countless organisms, from the trees themselves to the invisible microbes in the soil. Energy flows from sun to leaf, to insect to bird. Nutrients cycle from soil to tree to atmosphere to soil. Water rises from roots to leaves and transpires into air. The forest breathes. It grows. It adapts. It persists. And you are part of it, breathing the oxygen it produces, drinking water it filters, finding peace in its green embrace. Ocean systems, the blue heart. Now shift your mind from forest to ocean, from the green canopy to the blue expanse. The ocean covers about 71% of Earth's surface. It contains about 97% of Earth's water. It produces roughly half of the oxygen we breathe through the photosynthesis of phytoplankton. It absorbs about a quarter of the carbon dioxide released by human activities, helping to moderate climate change, but at the cost of becoming more acidic. The ocean drives weather and climate patterns, distributes heat around the planet, and supports an abundance of life that equals or exceeds that of land. Yet for all its importance, the ocean remains less explored than the surface of the moon. Its depths hold mysteries we are only beginning to uncover. Like forests, oceans have vertical structure. The euphotic zone, or sunlight zone, extends from the surface down to where light fades too much for photosynthesis, typically about 200 meters in clear water, less in murky coastal regions. This is where phytoplankton live, microscopic photosynthetic organisms drifting with ocean currents. Phytoplankton are diverse, including bacteria, algae, and protists, each species adapted to particular conditions. Though individually tiny, their collective photosynthesis makes them the base of the ocean food web and a crucial part of the global oxygen cycle. Phytoplankton are eaten by zooplankton, small animals that drift in the water. Zooplankton include the larval stages of many marine animals, from crabs to fish, as well as tiny crustaceans like copepods that spend their entire lives drifting in the water column. Zooplankton are eaten by small fish, which are eaten by larger fish, which might be eaten by even larger predators like tuna or sharks. This food chain, from phytoplankton to zooplankton to fish to apex predators, is how solar energy captured by photosynthesis flows through the ocean ecosystem. But ocean food webs are more complex than simple chains. Many organisms feed at multiple levels. Whales, the largest animals ever to live, are filter feeders that eat tiny zooplankton. Jellyfish pulse through the water, capturing zooplankton and small fish in their tentacles. Squid hunt fish and are themselves hunted by larger predators. The ocean food web is a complex tangle of who eats whom, with energy and nutrients flowing through multiple pathways. Not all organic matter is consumed by living organisms. Much of it sinks as marine snow. A continuous gentle rain of dead plankton, fecal pellets, and other organic particles drifting down through the water column. This marine snow is food for organisms living at depth, including bacteria, animals that filter food from water, and those that scavenge what reaches the seafloor. The sinking of organic matter also transports carbon from the surface to the deep ocean, part of what's called the biological pump that moves carbon from atmosphere to ocean depths. Below the sunlit surface lies the twilight zone, from about 200 to 1,000 meters deep. Here, dim blue light penetrates, but not enough for photosynthesis. Many fish and other animals in the twilight zone migrate vertically each day, rising toward the surface at night to feed, then descending to deeper, darker water during the day, perhaps to avoid predators that hunt by sight. This daily migration is the largest movement of animals on Earth by total biomass. Deeper still is the midnight zone, where no sunlight penetrates. This is the largest ecosystem on Earth by volume, cold, dark, and under tremendous pressure. Life here depends entirely on food falling from above or on chemosynthesis, a process used by some bacteria that derives energy from chemical reactions rather than sunlight. At hydrothermal vents, hot springs on the ocean floor where volcanic activity heats water, bacteria use chemicals in the vent water to produce organic matter, supporting entire ecosystems in total darkness. These vent communities include bizarre-looking creatures, tube worms that have no digestive system but host bacteria inside their bodies, crabs, shrimp, fish, and other organisms found nowhere else on Earth. The deep sea floor itself is a vast plain, occasionally interrupted by underwater mountains, ridges, and trenches. The sediments covering the seafloor accumulate slowly, built from the constant rain of marine snow and the shells of dead organisms. Many animals live in or on these sediments, from worms and burrowing creatures to sea cucumbers that crawl along the bottom. Even at the deepest points in the ocean, in trenches more than 10,000 meters deep, life exists, adapted to pressures that would crush most organisms. Closer to shore, different ecosystems thrive. Coral reefs, often called the rainforests of the sea, are built by tiny coral animals that secrete calcium carbonate skeletons. These skeletons accumulate over centuries, forming the complex structures of reefs. Coral animals themselves live in partnership with photosynthetic algae called zooxanthellae, which live inside coral tissues. The algae photosynthesize, providing most of the coral's energy needs. In return, the coral provides the algae with protection and access to sunlight. This partnership allows coral reefs to thrive in nutrient-poor tropical waters, building structures that support incredibly diverse communities of fish, invertebrates, and other organisms. Coral reefs cover less than 1% of the ocean floor, but support about 25% of all marine species. Estuaries, where rivers meet the ocean, are among the most productive ecosystems on Earth. Here, fresh water mixes with salt water, creating unique conditions and challenges. Organisms in estuaries must tolerate changing salinity as tides flow in and out. But the mixing of river and ocean water brings nutrients from both environments, supporting abundant plant growth. Salt marshes and mangrove forests fringe many estuaries, their grasses and trees stabilizing sediments and providing nursery habitat for fish and shellfish. Many commercially important fish species spend their juvenile stages in estuaries before moving to the open ocean as adults. The ocean doesn't just host life, it shapes Earth's climate and weather. Ocean currents act like conveyor belts, moving warm water from the tropics toward the poles and cold water from the poles toward the equator. The Gulf Stream, for example, carries warm water from the Gulf of Mexico northward along the eastern coast of North America and then across the Atlantic toward Europe. This current makes northern Europe significantly warmer than it would otherwise be. Without the Gulf Stream, London would have a climate like that of northern Canada. Ocean water also stores and releases heat much more slowly than air or land, giving coastal areas milder climates with less temperature variation. The ocean absorbs heat during summer and releases it during winter, moderating seasonal temperature swings. On a longer time scale, the ocean stores huge amounts of heat, and changes in ocean heat content can influence climate patterns for years or decades. Evaporation from the ocean surface is the primary source of water vapor for atmospheric circulation. This water vapor forms clouds, generates precipitation, and releases heat when it condenses, driving weather systems. Tropical storms and hurricanes form over warm ocean water, powered by the heat and moisture the ocean provides. Changes in ocean surface temperature can influence weather far away through atmospheric teleconnections. The ocean also plays a crucial role in the carbon cycle, as we discussed earlier. It absorbs carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and phytoplankton converts some of that carbon into organic matter through photosynthesis. When organisms die, some of that carbon sinks to the deep ocean, effectively removing it from the atmosphere for long periods. However, as atmospheric carbon dioxide increases, the ocean is absorbing more, and this is causing ocean acidification. When carbon dioxide dissolves in seawater, it forms carbonic acid, lowering the ocean's pH. This makes it harder for organisms like corals, shellfish, and some plankton to build their calcium carbonate shells and skeletons. Ocean acidification is already affecting marine ecosystems, and its impacts are expected to worsen if carbon dioxide emissions continue. Despite covering most of the planet, the ocean remains largely unexplored. We've mapped the surface of Mars in more detail than the ocean floor. New species are discovered regularly, from microbes to large fish. Each deep-sea expedition reveals creatures and ecosystems previously unknown to science. As we develop better technology to explore the ocean depths, we're realizing just how much we don't yet know about the blue heart of our planet. As you rest, as your breathing slows and deepens, imagine the ocean. Imagine waves rolling endlessly across its surface. Imagine phytoplankton drifting in sunlit water, capturing light, producing oxygen. Imagine fish swimming through the twilight zone. Imagine the deep, cold, dark water filling the ocean basins, patient and still. The ocean is always moving, always flowing, currents carrying water and dissolved substances around the globe. And, just as the ocean moves, so does life move through it. Energy flowing from sunlight to microscopic algae to the largest whales. Nutrients cycling from surface to depths to surface again. The blue heart of Earth, beating steadily through every hour of every day. Soil, the living foundation. We tend to think of soil as dirt, as something to brush off, to wash away, perhaps as background scenery for the plants that actually matter. But soil is not just crushed rock and dead plant matter. Soil is alive, a complex ecosystem in its own right, one of the most biodiverse habitats on Earth. In a single teaspoon of healthy soil, there are more microorganisms than there are people on Earth, as we've noted before, but this fact bears repeating because it's so astonishing. These organisms, bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes, and countless others, form a food web as complex as any above ground. They break down organic matter, recycle nutrients, form partnerships with plant roots, and compete with or prey upon each other. Without this invisible community, life as we know it would not exist. Soil forms slowly, over decades and centuries, through the weathering of rock and the accumulation of organic matter. The first step is the breakdown of rock into smaller particles. This happens through both physical and chemical weathering. Water seeps into cracks in rock, freezes, expands, and breaks the rock apart. Plant roots grow into crevices, applying pressure that can split solid stone. Chemical reactions, often involving weak acids in rainwater or acids produced by organisms, dissolve minerals from rock surfaces. Over time, solid rock transforms into the mineral particles that form the foundation of soil: sand, silt, and clay, classified by particle size. But mineral particles alone don't make soil. Soil also requires organic matter, the remains of dead plants, animals, and microorganisms. When a leaf falls to the ground, it begins to decompose. Larger decomposers, like insects and earthworms, break it into smaller pieces. Fungi and bacteria then break those pieces down further, releasing nutrients and transforming complex organic molecules into simpler forms. Some of this organic matter breaks down completely into carbon dioxide, water, and mineral nutrients. But some is transformed into humus, a dark, complex substance that can remain in soil for years or even centuries. Humus gives soil its dark color and improves its ability to hold water and nutrients. Soil is not a uniform substance. It typically consists of distinct layers called horizons, visible in the profile if you dig a deep hole. The topmost layer, the O horizon, is mostly organic matter, fresh, and partially decomposed leaves, twigs, and other plant material. Below that is the A horizon, or topsoil, where organic matter mixes with mineral particles. This is the most biologically active layer, rich in nutrients, roots, and organisms. It's typically darker than the layers below because of the organic matter it contains. Below the A horizon is the B horizon, or subsoil, which accumulates minerals and organic matter that leach down from above. It has less organic matter and fewer organisms than topsoil, but plant roots often extend into it. Below the B horizon is the C horizon, weathered rock and partially broken down parent material. At the bottom is the R horizon, solid bedrock. The properties of soil depend on its mineral composition, its organic matter content, its structure, and the organisms it hosts. Sandy soils drain quickly but don't hold nutrients well. Clay soils hold water and nutrients but can become waterlogged, or, when dry, hard and difficult for roots to penetrate. The best agricultural soils, called loams, are a mixture of sand, silt, and clay in proportions that balance drainage and water-holding capacity, nutrient retention, and root penetration. Organic matter improves any soil, helping sandy soils hold water and nutrients while helping clay soils drain better and remain loose enough for roots. The living community in soil is mind-bogglingly diverse. Bacteria are the most numerous organisms, with species adapted to every conceivable niche. Some bacteria decompose organic matter. Others fix nitrogen from the air, making it available to plants. Some form partnerships with plant roots, helping protect plants from disease or helping them access nutrients. Bacteria are eaten by protozoa and nematodes, tiny animals that graze on bacterial populations. When these predators consume bacteria, they release nutrients in forms plants can use, making these predators crucial to soil fertility. Fungi play equally important roles. We've already discussed mycorrhizal fungi that partner with plant roots. But there are many other fungi in soil, decomposers that break down dead plant material, predators that trap and consume nematodes, and others that form complex relationships with other organisms. Some fungi are incredibly effective decomposers, able to break down tough materials like cellulose and lignin that bacteria struggle with. The thread-like bodies of fungi, their hyphae, create a network through soil, binding particles together and creating stable soil structure. Larger organisms also inhabit soil. Earthworms burrow through soil, eating organic matter and mineral particles. As they tunnel, they mix layers of soil, bring nutrients from depth to the surface, and create channels that allow water and air to penetrate. Their castings, the soil they excrete, are richer in nutrients than the surrounding soil. Arthropods like insects, spiders, and millipedes also live in soil, some grazing on bacteria and fungi, others preying on other soil animals. Burrowing mammals, from shrews to badgers, dig in soil, further mixing it and creating habitat for other organisms. Healthy soil supports plant growth, and plants in turn support soil health. Plant roots hold soil in place, preventing erosion. They secrete sugars and other organic compounds into the soil, feeding bacteria and fungi. These root exudates can selectively feed beneficial organisms, allowing plants to cultivate the microbial community in their rhizosphere, the zone of soil directly around roots. When plants die, their remains become food for decomposers, returning nutrients to the soil. Deep-rooted plants can bring nutrients from deep soil to the surface, where their fallen leaves release those nutrients where shallow-rooted plants can access them. Agriculture both depends on and impacts soil. Most of our food comes from soil, grown in plants whose roots extract water and nutrients from the earth. But intensive agriculture can degrade soil. Tilling breaks up soil structure, exposing organic matter to rapid decomposition and leaving soil vulnerable to erosion. Monoculture, growing the same crop year after year, can deplete specific nutrients and encourage buildup of crop-specific pests and diseases. Heavy use of synthetic fertilizers can harm soil organisms and alter soil chemistry. Compaction from heavy machinery reduces pore space, making it harder for roots, water, and air to penetrate. But agriculture can also be managed to build soil health. Practices like reducing tillage, planting cover crops, rotating diverse crops, and adding compost can increase organic matter, improve soil structure, enhance water-holding capacity, and support beneficial soil organisms. These practices can actually increase soil carbon, removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and storing it in soil. Given that soils contain more carbon than the atmosphere and all plant life combined, even small increases in soil carbon storage could significantly impact atmospheric carbon dioxide levels. Soil is not a limitless resource. It forms slowly, but can be lost quickly through erosion or degradation. Fertile soil is essential for feeding human populations, yet soil degradation is occurring worldwide, threatening food security. Understanding soil as a living ecosystem, appreciating its complexity and its crucial role in supporting life, is essential to protecting it. As you relax into sleep, think of the ground beneath you, below floors and foundations, below pavements and parking lots, or, if you're fortunate, just below a thin cover of grass or leaf litter is soil. It might be a few inches deep or many feet. It is dark and moist, filled with roots and organisms, particles of rock and fragments of dead leaves slowly being transformed by countless tiny lives. This soil anchors plants that feed you. It filters water you drink. It stores carbon. It is habitat for organisms found nowhere else. It is the living foundation of terrestrial life, humble, overlooked, essential. Seasonal rhythms and adaptations. Life on Earth exists in patterns that repeat, cycles nested within cycles. The most fundamental is the day-night cycle, the steady rotation of our planet bringing each point on its surface through light and darkness. But other cycles shape life as well, particularly the cycle of seasons, driven by Earth's tilted axis as it orbits the Sun. These seasonal changes bring profound shifts in temperature, day length, and precipitation, and life has evolved countless strategies to cope with and exploit these patterns. In temperate regions with distinct seasons, spring brings warming temperatures and increasing day length. Snow melts, soil thaws, and water becomes available again after winter's freeze. Deciduous trees, which dropped their leaves in autumn, now use stored sugars to produce new buds that burst into leaves. The forest canopy, bare all winter, rapidly fills in, creating shade below. But in the brief window before the canopy closes, spring wildflowers bloom on the forest floor, racing to complete their life cycle while light is still available. Spring beauty, trillium, bloodroot, and many others emerge, flower, set seed, and die back, all within a few weeks, timing their growth to exploit the spring light gap. Animals also respond to spring's arrival. Birds return from wintering grounds to the south, timing their migration to arrive when food is abundant. Insects emerge from eggs or pupae that survived the winter. Amphibians wake from dormancy and move to ponds and streams to breed, their evening choruses filling the air. Mammals that hibernated emerge hungry, ready to feed and breed as food becomes available again. The spring pulse of life is a response to increasing resources after winter's scarcity. Summer brings warmth and, in many regions, abundant moisture. This is the growing season, when plants produce most of their annual growth and animals raise their young. Food is plentiful, but competition is also intense. Many species time reproduction to coincide with peak food availability, ensuring their offspring have the best chance of survival. Birds that nested in spring now have fledglings to feed. Those hungry mouths require enormous amounts of food, and parent birds may feed their nestlings thousands of caterpillars during the few weeks between hatching and fledging. As summer wanes, the angle of sunlight changes, day length decreases, and in many regions, temperatures begin to cool. These environmental cues trigger autumn behaviors in many species. Plants begin to prepare for winter. Deciduous trees withdraw nutrients from their leaves into their roots and trunk for storage. Chlorophyll breaks down, revealing other pigments that give autumn its spectacular colors. The leaves then die and fall, reducing the tree's water loss and potential damage from winter storms. This deciduousness is an adaptation to winter conditions, keeping leaves that would be damaged by freezing, that can't photosynthesize when water is frozen, is not worthwhile. Some animals also prepare for winter by storing food. Squirrels bury nuts and seeds, creating caches they will retrieve during winter. Jays and woodpeckers do the same. These seed-caching animals often forget where they buried some seeds, and those seeds may germinate in spring, making the animals inadvertent planters, helping disperse the seeds of the trees they depend on. Many animals fatten up in autumn, building energy reserves they'll need to survive winter. Bears entering hibernation may gain several pounds per day in autumn, eating constantly to build up the fat they'll live on through months of dormancy. Migratory birds also fatten before their journeys, doubling their body weight in some cases, providing fuel for flights that may cover thousands of miles. Migration itself is one of nature's great seasonal phenomena. Birds may be the most visible migrants, but many other animals also move seasonally. Monarch butterflies migrate from northern North America to Mexico, traveling up to 3,000 miles. Caribou in Alaska and Canada migrate between summer calving grounds in the Arctic and winter ranges in the taiga, traveling in herds that can number in the tens of thousands. Gray whales migrate between feeding grounds in Alaska and breeding grounds in Mexico, a round trip of more than 10,000 miles. These migrations track seasonal resources, allowing animals to exploit productive areas during summer and retreat to more moderate climates for winter. Winter in temperate and polar regions brings cold, shortened days, and in many places, snow and ice. Many plants become dormant, their above-ground portions dying back while roots survive underground. Animals cope with winter in various ways. Some, like many birds, migrate to warmer regions. Others, like deer and moose, stay active, but must survive on reduced food resources, browsing on bark and twigs when other food is unavailable. Some mammals grow thicker coats for winter, providing better insulation. Hibernation is an extraordinary adaptation to winter scarcity. Bears, ground squirrels, marmots, and some other mammals enter a state of dormancy where body temperature drops, metabolic rate slows dramatically, and the animal survives on stored fat without eating or drinking for weeks or months. Heart rate and breathing slow to just a few breaths per minute. This strategy allows the animal to survive when food is unavailable and foraging would cost more energy than it would gain. True hibernators, like ground squirrels, can lower their body temperature to near freezing and can remain dormant for 7 or 8 months. Insects have their own strategies for surviving winter. Many die but leave eggs or pupae that can survive freezing temperatures. Some insects produce antifreeze compounds that prevent their body fluids from freezing. Monarch butterflies that migrate to Mexico cluster in huge groups on trees, their bodies pressed together for warmth, waiting out winter until they can return north in spring. Amphibians face particular challenges in winter. Most cannot survive freezing, so they must find refuges where temperatures stay above freezing, deep in pond mud, underground, or in caves. But some frogs have evolved the remarkable ability to survive freezing. Their bodies produce glucose and other cryoprotectants that prevent cell damage when ice forms in their tissues. A frozen wood frog appears dead, its heart stopped, its blood not circulating. But when spring brings warmth, the frog thaws and resumes normal activity, a small miracle of cold tolerance. These seasonal rhythms have shaped life for millions of years. Migration routes, hibernation sites, and seasonal behaviors are encoded in genes, but also learned and transmitted culturally in many species. Changes to seasonal patterns, driven by climate change, are now disrupting these ancient rhythms. Spring comes earlier in many places, while autumn comes later. This might seem beneficial, a longer growing season, but it can create mismatches. If plants bloom before migrant pollinators arrive, or if insects emerge before the birds that feed on them return from migration, the consequences can ripple through ecosystems. As you rest, as the boundary between waking and sleep grows hazy, feel the turn of seasons in your body's memory. Every human carries ancestral knowledge of seasonal change, patterns laid down over thousands of generations. Spring's awakening, summer's abundance, autumn's preparation, winter's rest. These rhythms pulse through the natural world and through us, though modern life often insulates us from their most direct effects. Let yourself sink into the rhythm of the year, the great wheel turning, life ebbing and flowing with the tilt of Earth and the journey around the sun. Closing reflection. We've traveled tonight through nature's great systems and cycles, from the invisible threads connecting organisms in ecosystems, through the cycles of elements that sustain all life, into forests and oceans, soil and seasons. Each system we explored is connected to all the others. The water cycle depends on plants, which depend on soil, which depends on decomposers, which depend on the carbon cycle, which depends on photosynthesis, which depends on nutrients cycled by microorganisms. Pull on any thread in this vast weaving, and the whole fabric shifts. Nature is not a background against which human life unfolds. We are part of nature, woven into the same cycles, dependent on the same processes. Every breath connects you to the atmosphere and to the photosynthetic organisms that maintain it. Every meal connects you to soil, water, and the endless work of organisms transforming sunlight and minerals into food. Every drink of water connects you to the vast cycling between ocean, atmosphere, and land. Understanding these connections doesn't diminish the wonder of nature. It deepens it, revealing patterns more intricate than any human design. Processes that have refined themselves over billions of years. The natural world faces challenges, from habitat loss to pollution to climate change. Challenges largely created by human activities. But understanding how nature works gives us the knowledge to protect it, to make choices that support rather than undermine the systems we depend on. We can reduce our impact. We can protect and restore habitats. We can work with natural processes rather than against them. And we can truly appreciate, the remarkable living planet we call home. If this journey through nature's wonders has brought you peace, I invite you once more to like this video or subscribe to the Sleepy Science Society. Sharing helps others find these restful explorations. You can also leave a comment about what you'd like to learn about next, your thoughts adding to a community of curious, sleepy minds. For now, let all these ideas drift away like morning mist. You don't need to hold on to anything you've heard tonight. Let the details fade, leaving only a warm sense of connection, an understanding that you are part of something vast and ancient and ongoing. The cycles continue with or without your attention. The forest breathes through the night. The ocean currents flow. Nutrients cycle through soil. Life persists in its patient, persistent ways. Let your breathing slow and deepen. Let your body sink heavy into your bed. Let your mind release its grip on waking thoughts. You are safe. You are connected to everything. The same atoms that form your body have cycled through countless lives before yours. The water in your cells has fallen as rain, flowed in ancient rivers, evaporated from warm seas. The carbon in your bones was once in the air, before that in a plant, before that perhaps in an animal, and so on back through time. You are made of the world, and you are home. The night is here. The world turns in darkness, half the planet resting while the other half sees the sun. Life continues its ancient patterns. And you can rest now, held by the same forces that hold the forest and the ocean, the soil and the sky. Let yourself go. Let sleep come softly, naturally, like night settling over the land. Everything is as it should be. Rest now. Good night.